idea that they are victims, encouraging the stigma that they are somehow less than, that they wouldn't be able to accomplish these things were it not for the white savior handing them a big chunk of money, and thus being counterintuitive, being potentially having the opposite effect of what we would be trying to accomplish with reparations. Am I right so far?
Right so far, yep, that's one of them for sure.
Another might be just the idea of even if we do not make, another one of your arguments might be the complication of deciding who is entitled to reparations. Does it stop at ancestors of slaves? Does it stop at ancestors of Jim Crow? Does it simply take effect if you are a Black American citizen? Like, I think there's arguments to be made in any case, but I'm just saying I'm Concord iron penning you. So like if we do not make it just based on race alone, then like historical records or like family lineage records when it comes to people who were once property are so severely fragmented, it could be very difficult to identify based on that lineage who would be entitled to this, and the failure of white slave owners to not keep track of what then was property should not be a reason that their ancestors down the road do not get
Don't argue against the point you're saying I'm making yet.
Am I? No, I thought I was. I'm still with you. I'm still doing you.
Oh, I thought you started talking about why that shouldn't be important. My bad.
No, I'm saying that like you would probably make the argument that it would be just too difficult to trace back. It would be too your argument might be that it would be too difficult to identify based on your family lineage whether you are entitled to reparations, and that is partly because slave owners didn't like keep as good a records probably on their slaves as maybe they do on their own family, and we shouldn't let their failure to keep records be a reason that their ancestors down the road don't get it are the ones left out when it comes time to for the government to say, I'm sorry, here's money.
For sure.
Okay, and I imagine there's more, but
Well,
we can't afford it.
you
those who were not to those who did not come from slavery, those who capital who reaped the benefit of the labor that these other folks gave away for free.
Yes, and I think that you would say that the people who reach the benefit are not just the slave owners, but anybody who participated in the industry the slave owners were a part of. So it's a pretty wide industry, and thus you can make the argument that the only reason America is America today is because of the industry the slaves worked for. I would say you might say, oh, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Just as a pet move. When can I talk to the Jim Crow?
I'll call you up when we're about to meet.
When is that gonna be up to the work?
I don't know.
Okay.
We're talking about reparations, and I don't want to give a time limit.
It's like, okay, that's my cue to leave.
That's my cue to leave. Love you.
Love you.
I would also, Iron Man, probably one of the points that you have is, that we've paid reparations to other people. It's not a new thing. Probably you might argue that, just because it's difficult to do doesn't make it not worthy of trying to do. I would think you would argue that not just the monetary economic cost of the trickle down of slavery and not having that advantage, but Jim Crow and everything else made it to where they really haven't had an even playing field until quite recently, since Jim Crow was eliminated.
And yeah.
Not that it's even at all. Not,
Okay.
Let me just say that. Not that it is even, just that it's been more even than it ever has been.
Sure, yeah. You got yourself.
Okay. No one's arguing it's not there. Let me okay. I think that is all that I can iron out.
And yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. Yeah, a few points that I would probably add, but like it depends. Do you want me to make my actual case first, or do you want to start?
Oh, well, let's see. Do you have a preference?
Well, since I'm pro, maybe it's best that I start and you, like perhaps your counter arguments will lend themselves to my arguments.
Yeah, then we'll just see which ones we gotta hack at.
Yeah, we'll see like where our points of agreement and disagreements are. So, yeah, indeed, slavery was super bad. I would argue, slavery among the worst crimes against humanity in history. Yes. And indeed, it like no one needs to be
Oh, maybe should have done it to it. Oh, maybe should have done it to it. A song I did earlier, I meant to sing to myself off of camera, but I just remembered it. Thankfully, I remember the melody. It is now captured.
Financial position at the end of slavery, at emancipation time, and these folks who, as of 2 days ago, were property. Like, nobody's denying that there was an imbalance there, and like had the government, as part of emancipation, decided that these former slaves were entitled to reparative justice for these many years of service, which were probably much better documented, much easier to trace while these folks were still alive. Well, I mean, slavery lasted many centuries, so I can't say that. That's a bad argument, but I imagine that like if the government had reversed its position on owning people in a more decisive, just like 180 sort of way, and announced a reparations plan, then well, you know what? This is an argument that I'm completely like just spitballing in. So I think I'm gonna bail out of that because I don't see the relevance to just.
Well, I think the point you were making, if I may, was simply that there are people who very clearly benefited from this labor, which was atrocious, and so we could perhaps pinpoint who is responsible monetarily.
Yeah, it would be easier if we announced a reparations plan then, like right after emancipating the slaves. Like perhaps the argument against reparations for the complexity of it, for the complexity of figuring out who is owed benefits, that question would not be as difficult to answer. Although there'd be any number of more reasons that nobody would vote for a reparations plan in 1865.
Well, wasn't 40 acres a mule was a thing?
Yeah.
I think that was more like a promise, not a contractual.
Yeah, and for like centuries of enslavement and all of the many millions of dollars that the white men had accumulated from their labor, I would say that 40 acres and a mule doesn't quite cut it. And I don't think it was even intended to cut. It was just like as a way to, they had to compete with they had to compete in a labor force with white people who were used to owning them as slaves, and thus they had lower wages, and the laws started being made, hence the Jim Crow laws that essentially made it illegal for a black person to be unemployed in this world where it was very hard for them to find paid employment, and thus like they could be just roped into chain gangs if they're caught walking down the highway as an unemployed black person in America, free or not. And it was basically slavery 2.0 in so many ways, and this was government sanctioned. And so it's like,
Is that what chain gang is? Is that where chain gang comes from?
well, I don't know that chain gangs existed before they ever
That's fucking fascinating.
I haven't tried a verbal prompt yet. I plan to, but I haven't done it.
That's in my head now. To the sun going down.
Is there a law
Looking on
that
the highways and byways and waiting on the frown.
black person
See throwing their lives away. Then you hear so much saying. That's the sound of working on change. That's the sound of working on change.
Can it wait until we go watch, get to Better Call, because it shows up in my, thank you, I appreciate that, and I'll turn it over and everything. What you got?
There's no Jim Crow era law that literally said it is illegal to be unemployed, but many southern states did have vagrancy and labor laws that effectively criminalized black unemployment and could land someone on a chain gang or convict lease camps. How vagrancy laws work. Several southern states passed vagrancy statutes that defined a vagrant as someone who appeared unemployed, homeless, or idle, even if they were just traveling, job hunting, or visiting relatives. In practice, police and sheriffs disproportionately targeted black men under these laws, arresting them for vagrancy or loitering if they lacked a current job or visible means of support. So yeah, that is essentially what I mean by slavery 2.0.
Yeah, for real, because that's some bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, there's just the segregation of it, the sunset towns, like where there were some towns where, as a black person, you had to be gone by sunset. You had to go through a different entrance in establishments if you were allowed in at all. I mean,
Well, aren't those more like, these are the rules and will beat you or run you out of town if you cross them, not necessarily laws, just like town credos.
I think they are laws, cause like, but yeah, yeah, like I said, you're raising the possible collateral that, sunset town, like it wasn't necessarily illegal, for a black person to be in a sunset town after sunset. It was just frowned upon, they would be run out of town by the locals.
Yeah, or, I don't know.
It'll make locals or the cops, I imagine. So in sunset towns in those days, was it actually illegal for black people to remain thereafter sunset? Yes, in many sundown or sunset towns, it was actually illegal for black people to remain in town after sunset, but not in every case. These towns used a mix of written ordinances, informal threats, and violence to enforce racial exclusion after them.
Got it. So it's an ordinance for the town, it's not like a statewide law.
Not a statewide law, no. But yeah, it was a town ordinance passed by the voters of the town.
That's some bullshit.
Yeah.
How did that get, is that where?
I'm just, yeah, like I'm really just over explaining. We all know what segregation is. We
Sure,
all
yeah.
mostly know
I
how
was
that
just wondering
works.
if that was where we get the whole everybody's got a right to a lawyer thing.
Oh.
Cause if they were on a chain gang and they didn't have their right to a lawyer,
Hmm.
they
because of the historical significance of like race in this country, it is just harder for a person to be black in America than it is many other places. I mean, other places have racism, have had slavery, and they've all got their own demons to fight. But like there is, I feel, an imbalance that has not been corrected. And as you mentioned, like even though it is complicated, I don't think that should be the reason that we decide not to do it. Like, I think there's no perfect implementation of a program for reparations. I don't think that will make everyone happy. No matter what we do, somebody will be excluded that shouldn't be, someone will be included that shouldn't be. To me, it's more about the principle of just declaring in one voice, you know, maybe even as part of the UN agreements of some kind, that this is wrong and this is just an absolute crime against humanity that we will never indulge in again.
Would it help you to know we did apologize as a government?
Remind me what that took the form of.
An actual formal apology in written form, I believe. Let me double check with the magic box. Crap. I need to know what settings.
You could open it in 2 tabs.
I do, that's what I just did. So good. Really now? Oh, something about the apology.
Oh yes, that what the form did the apology for slavery take?
Formal apology. Yes, no. Okay. In 2008, the United States House of Representatives passed H.Res. 194, a resolution, quote, apologizing for the wrongs committed against African Americans by slavery and Jim Crow laws, end quote. The House text acknowledges the fundamental injustice, cruelty, brutality, and inhumanity of slavery and Jim Crow laws. Notes that their effects continue to harm Black Americans long after abolition. In June 2009, the Senate unanimously adopted its own apology resolution. On behalf of the United States for the wrongdoings committed against them and their ancestors who suffered under slavery and Jim Crow, it similarly recognized slavery and segregation as fundamental injustice and acknowledges the ongoing consequences as well. So Congress has formally apologized for things.
Okay, well that's, yeah, I hadn't understood that it took that language exactly. I mean, the emancipation itself was kind of a acknowledgement that, yeah, whoopsie daisies, we really shouldn't have done this thing. I should have played with it. But like, yeah, I hadn't known that there was a formal sort of statement like that. That's where I think that reparations in something of monetary value, whether it be money itself or housing loans or tuition reimbursement or something, like is it makes a stronger case given that what I consider the trickle-down effect of slavery and Jim Crow on poverty that pervades minority communities today. Like, I mean, many are, not all, obviously, but like a disproportionate amount relative to their representation of the population represent a larger percentage of the imprisoned population than they do in the general population. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. That's a whole different conversation though, in my opinion.
And I see why that would be your opinion. I guess I do tend to like branch out into the sort of model of poverty as a disease that could be cured by like giving everybody a big influx of money. And that's like I do want to move on from this if you don't see it as relevant, but I want to try to make the case for why why I see it as relevant to the argument. Because like
What's happening here? Background. Okay, car, sorry. There was a car alarm, just like beep, 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 beep.
oh I see.
But now it's done. Please continue.
Okay. Is there a chirping or something going on your end? There.
Yes, there's
Okay.
literally the birds outside my house.
Okay, so there's a literal bird chirp. Okay, never mind.
Birds chirping.
Okay, it's just I wasn't sure if it was like a dog toy or something.
Nope, they're just emulating a tiny police car, apparently.
Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah. So there was some study done on happiness relative to total net worth, and it was found that like $50,000 a year is about the benchmark for where like you are happy enough, like in a sense that like there's not a whole lot of difference in happiness between making 75K and making 2 billion. Like under that line though, under that like $50,000 mark, you're miserable though. Like statistically, you're pretty much having to work more than one job. You don't have access to as good a healthcare. You're basically one medical emergency away from complete financial ruin, and that's a very stressful way to live, especially if you got family, kids. Like, so like in the case of making 50,000 a year, like well, yeah, if people who do make above that, people who do make 50K or above, they tend to not worry as much about medical emergencies. They're able to take vacations. They're able to buy gifts for people, and it's if everybody could have some disposable income like that, I feel that the sort of epidemic of poverty is going to vanish along with it. And so I think that like some influx no sir, and you do not run. You never ever run. I mean, this is a talk. If my dad just randomly sat me down one day and told me all this stuff, I would be pretty freaked out. And this is apparently every black kid has to learn this because of the, as I see it, the racism that is sort of embedded in the criminal justice system in the country. And so for that reason, like I considered like maybe having a cutout just simply being black in America, where you are going to be treated differently at some point in your life, like almost inevitably. But I think in terms of just like, as I said, there's no perfect system, there's no perfect way to draw these boundaries of who is eligible or not. But I guess that's where what is best comes into play, versus what is right. Like how, where can we draw the boundaries such that the most people who are in poverty now get lifted out of it. And I don't know, like I'm not the bookworm who would figure all this out. That'd be the lowly staffer, or maybe an LLM would come in handy. But that's the figure that I would be interested in. Is like where to draw the boundaries in such a way that we could lift the maximum number of people out of poverty, and that way it would be both so than those who immigrated here, like in this lifetime, like first generation immigrants. It's hard to imagine that they would need this sort of program as much as I don't know. I want to.
First generation immigrants, we don't think there's many of them in poverty.
Yeah, that's what makes sense in my gut, but I'm not sure how much the statistics would bear that out. It just seems like if you're a first generation immigrant, you're wanting to pursue the American dream. I mean, this is anecdotal, like based on everyone that I've met who's first generation immigrant. They come here to like bring their big idea to New York and find funding and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Not in every case, obviously. But, it seems logical that they probably don't represent as much of the population in poverty in America as those with ancestors who grew up in the So I would guess that.
So you're saying it would be a statistically insignificant amount of people we would be helping inadvertently by just giving it to Black people in general?
No, I guess that cutoff for me was just to pay homage to like what these reparations are for. It's part of the right side of the argument rather than the best side of my argument, I guess. At the end of the day, if it would lift more people out of poverty to simply include all Black people, regardless of whether they have ancestors in the Jim Crow South, then yeah, I would support that idea. Like, I guess I see the opportunity to apologize for reparations as also a convenient way to kind of prove this experiment that lifting populations out of poverty will reduce crime by like 1,000,000-fold.
So, lifting people out of poverty, again, definitely we agree. I think giving them money will not solve that problem at all. Like straight up monetary availability, that's not gonna help. It's not gonna help fix the institutional part of it. It's not gonna help fix anybody who's financially averse. Like if you don't know how to manage money very well, then just handing you all of this money, even if it's on a monthly basis, might not do anything for you. But then also, if we as a country, as if we as taxpaying citizens, as members of this community, decide that we would like to do that for them, do you think the number of people that are now at the poverty line, the new poverty line that is bare minimum basic, basically is what we're doing, but only for Black people, do you think more people would need that once that was implemented or less?
I'm confused about the question, I'm sorry.
Totally understand. I'm trying to do it another way because that means everyone else will too. Basically I'm asking think giving everybody free money will make them want to continue to work and participate in the community, or do you think that will wind up being a whole lot more people say, okay, great, and then stop doing their job since they're gonna get this money?
So, I'm not sure how well the statistics would bear this out, but I believe that anecdotally speaking, if, universal basic income were a thing, if they started that tomorrow and it happened to be like enough for me to continue living my cushy lifestyle, even if it was a bit of a pay cut from what I'm making now as a web developer, if it were enough to allow me to stay in this neighborhood, in, you know, this nice, apartment in this Gold Coast area of Chicago, like, I would like to think that I would still participate, in the economy in the way of like, paying more, time to this podcast, and, you know, still pursuing the audio code project in hopes of, you know, making more, money than the minimum basic income. Like, I would still want to be rich, and I've always wanted that. Like, I think everybody deep down probably wants to be financially secure, have, you know, a nice nest egg to,
Certainly.
yeah, I am no different. So like, I feel like I would be motivated. I mean, especially when it comes to talking to girls. I don't want to say that I play video games all day and I you know, live my life on this wonderful universal basic income that's been made available to us. What do you do? That's
But what you are saying you would now have time to do is the things that you love. You're suggesting that's still contributing to your community,
And-
simply because you're
Right, just to-
but if no one cares about it and no one listens to it, then it isn't a valuable contribution to the community. Would you disagree with that?
I would say that it would allow me to potentially make an even greater contribution to the community than if I were to be a web developer for 40 more years. I would be taking a risk in these early days, but like having more time to dedicate to making the project a success. I could spend more time with AI to develop strategies that could reach wider audiences. I could even deign to add a like and subscribe button to the end of a video.
Never track record, we're never doing it. I know, I've seen it, I know it works, I've seen the statistics, we're not doing it.
Okay, I have no dog in this fight. But yeah, like and if indeed in the best case scenario, it did catch fire at some point, it did like, get enough interest, that we could get sponsorship and do it for a living, and if that many people were watching them, that would be a much better contribution. That would be much more of me that I'm contributing to mankind than if it were just my code and all these programs that I wrote for 40 years.
But that's an if versus a definite.
Yeah.
So
but
like,
high risk, high reward.
yes, but you alone aren't the one taking that risk. You're making everyone else take that risk with you.
So,
Because everyone else is paying for the salary that keeps you in your cushy house, but with more time to do the thing.
right, but like America's kind of founded on being able to like place these bets and like having the freedom to like secure a business loan. I mean, that's like the government. That is the people taking a risk on this business venture that you're doing, that you're trying. So like I think the same would apply to a reparations program. Like we would be placing bets on what all these people would do for a living, but I think that
We win more than the house?
I do. I think we would win more than we would lose because I believe in this experiment that they did that you know, happiness level relative to income. I think I'm sure like that this study was years ago. The sensible income to participate in the economy, and that's a net positive. More money moving in the economy is always good for a capitalist society.
Fair enough. And again, I'm going to agree that lifting people out of poverty is the right thing to do, and that we simply disagree on how to lift people out of poverty the best is for everyone.
Okay.
Because all of my suggestions involve capitalism.
Okay.
What we've been doing as a society since emancipation and abolition, is emancipation and abolitionist the same thing, or?
Yeah, I think there was the Emancipation Proclamation which abolished slavery. So,
Okay, so same, got it. What was I saying?
We disagree on how to lift people out of poverty. Your ideas are more capitalist, going back to the emancipation, abolition.
Yes, okay, so since the end of slavery, society has been on a forward journey to legally remove as many of those biases and obstacles as possible. And the longer we go, the easier it should get, hopefully. And I would think that just based on the number of Black millionaires we have now in America versus just a generation ago, would say, yes, we're going in the right direction. Have we finished? No. Will we ever finish? Probably not, because ultimately it should just be about living in symbiosis as much as you possibly can. Like, what are you willing to give up so I can be more comfortable? What am I willing to give up so you can be more comfortable? And luckily, I think we have a lot more people nowadays choosing kindness. Maybe. At least it felt that way growing up. Ever since social media, it has felt not the case. That's a whole other tangent. We're not going down that tangent, Jennifer. I apologize.
Let's have a meta-free week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue
Another San Armando one already.
as far as anything is legally concerned, every American citizen has equality of opportunity now. Whereas chain gangs, that was not equality of opportunity. Like, that person should be treated no different than any other American citizen. Whatever you get as an American citizen is what you get as an American citizen, regardless. And I feel like legally we have closed those gaps. On like a, well,
On paper, things are equal.
yes.
Like,
On paper they're equal. It's the social shit we gotta figure out.
yeah.
So I will say I'm whenever people ask for reparations, and the thing that they mean is give me X number an hour, 6 days a week for 200 years, and we'll call it even, feels, what's the word?
Commensurate. the same.
Are they?
Well, I mean, I guess you can have the president can have a policy, a foreign policy without making any laws, as we have seen.
You're calling that a president having foreign policy? Fancy. That's
Yeah,
the best joke all night, my friend.
Policies do a lot of work in that sense, but,
Yeah.
I mean, most presidents have a foreign policy. Reagan had a particular policy, and that was without,
They do, yes.
yeah. Although, like, lawmakers are also known as policy makers, right?
Yeah.
What's the diff? In the US in politics, what's the difference between a law and a policy? Core difference is that law is a legally binding rule that people or institutions must follow, while a policy is a guiding framework or set of goals that shows how a government or organization plans to act. Yeah. Okay, that makes
Okay, so
sense.
it's different.
It is different, yeah.
Yeah, it's a policy. Like, definitely, I agree that there should be policy, usings. I don't think it should be in the form of money specifically, because using the example of, the guy who, there's one guy that thinks he's owed 300,000 K, there's somebody else that thinks they're owed $15 million. I don't see any form, any solutional form involving paying money directly, a solution that doesn't end in more tears than happiness, or a solution that doesn't feel exclusionary. Like, nobody wins. Everybody's gonna hate what they get. There's gonna be people who feel excluded no matter what.
Can I respond to that real quick?
I'm not gonna hear what you said.
Okay.
Ah, there it is. There it is. No matter what, you're gonna have to draw a line. And where that line is drawn is going to feel arbitrary and unfair to someone.
Yeah.
If we can recognize as a people that that's not the best solution, that would be great, because then we could get all the people who do believe that is the solution to focus all their mind and attention on the thing we actually think will help. I think things like, if you're a public, not a public, if you're a private school, charter school, whatever it is, and you would like to receive public funds, that's ridiculous because you're a private school and that's what private school is all about. But if you would like these funds, then you will accept these funds in exchange for accepting 3 children off this list into your next curriculum. How we make that work is going to be a line we have to draw, and I know nobody's going to be happy about it, but it could help. No one asks if it will harm.
Reparations could help in this to do.
Yes.
Okay.
If it was just a money lump sum, bring everybody up to $50,000. I think the number of people don't change the supply and the demand. So the thing keeping an economy afloat is going to be artificially adjusted somehow, and the effects that that will have might be quite harmful. What those effects are, I'm not sure, 'cause I'm not an economist. But that's where it feels like I was going.
Okay, well, so I would agree that, I agree with your argument that, it is difficult to determine a figure based on what people feel they are owed. Because I think if you ask anyone who grew up in the Jim Crow South or was exposed, to slavery, like directly or indirectly, would say there is simply no dollar amount that would be enough. Right, like, I mean, it's almost insulting to suggest that we should put a dollar amount on this historical injustice. And that's why I feel that, like, the right, part of my, argument has more to do with, who is eligible, and the what or the how has more to do with what will do the most good for the most people. Like, because we can't determine the number based on what people feel that they are owed, because as you say, someone is going to feel they are owed this much, some people that much. And if we're outright saying that we're going to make that determination based on the perceived injustice done to your people, like, that is just opening the floodgates to all kinds of lawsuits.
Excellent, then I think we have found our agreement point to jump forward from here, because we both agree that if we could financially compensate everyone in a fair way, that's fair for everyone, that would be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Since we can't do that, here's the practical version.
Yeah.
Here's a practical way we might actually be able to mend the fence.
Indeed. And one more quick thing to say about your statement. One more quick thing to say about your statement that we wouldn't change supply and demand. I feel that there would be a change in supply and demand by virtue of these people who've been lifted out of poverty would have disposable income and eat at nicer restaurants, and that would all circulate into the economy, and like there would be greater demand for these services, which more people can now afford, and thus more supply. that something that would be likely to happen, or were they just,
I believe
like,
there's data on this. I will go take that as an action item to look up for you.
okay, cool.
If we were to do this, there would be several lower paying jobs that no longer have people to do those jobs. Some people might argue that that's a good thing if they can't produce a livable wage, they shouldn't be in business. I feel like that deeply neglects the nuance of the market economy we could have. No, that's not the right way to say that. I think it deeply ignores the nuance of that situation.
Is this, in reference to something like a like a mandatory $15 minimum, wage kind of thing? Like,
That's actually the kind of goes hand in hand. I'm still talking just about the like everybody gets 50 grand a year salary regardless.
so we're talking about every person, or?
Sorry, black people.
Oh, okay.
No, we're not talking about basic. We're talking about basic, but only for black people.
Got it, okay.
Basically, is what we're talking about.
Yeah, thanks.
Say basic again.
Say how about that?
So people with like fast food jobs, nobody would work those jobs anymore. That might be fine, because we assume we'll have robots to do it all for us, perhaps. Who knows? Don't know if that's going to be
Oh,
soon enough, time efficient enough.
I guess we really should address this debate comes at a time when the economic future of the world is so very uncertain.
So it's
Like, universal basic income might have to be a thing much sooner than, this, like, idea of reparations that we're hatching, to where, like, it wouldn't, I wouldn't necessarily argue that, the idea of reparations would become irrelevant. I would just argue that, like, it obviously wouldn't be an influx of money, it would be something else, some 0% home loan opportunity or something.
yes. So we were still arguing on the right versus best way to do things. And we will get to that.
Okay.
Right now, I'm simply describing why adding that much to the income might not be the best way to go. Oh, right. Never mind. That is, I do need to be opposing points in the best category, because that is the steel man. Oh, we got there, Jack Brett. Thank God. Apologies, my friend.
Alright.
Okay. So that's irrelevant now. Equality of opportunity is why I started talking about this. And how the way we've made the laws and some policies have helped even out the equality of opportunity, despite the way each of us starts those opportunities. The law has made it to where technically you're all on even footing. We aren't as a species in general.
No.
But we are working towards that.
Yeah.
What you can and cannot governmentally do for socially related things is a line that I like to discuss as frequently as possible. Because I am
civilized society, we're
Yes.
a rule of law society.
Yeah, the only reason we had to make laws about equal opportunity or equal whatever in the Constitution, the only reason we had to do civil rights litigation, not litigation, 1 second. Oh, shush. No. Oh, that was so loud.
Did your phone just ring in your ear?
Yes.
Got it. Jump call?
Yes.
Fucking jump call.
I don't know. iPhone. Look at me, real quick tangent, iPhone. I don't understand why you haven't given us a option in our user settings to just auto block spam calls. Anything you think is a spam call, I'd like to auto block. I get that that might weed out some things I don't want, but maybe you could give them like a heads up or something like, this person thinks you're spam, you'll have to try to reach them a different way. Thanks, goodbye. I don't know, but I would love that option, please and thank you. See what it's hurting? This is the hurt, this is the need that the market needs to fill. I'm just kidding, okay, I'll move on. Okay, so best points, some of your best points. This is what we should do because it's best. Because just giving everybody money is clearly not the best way to do things.
Okay.
That is the right way to do things, not the best way to do things. So, there are several points I'd like to make. If any of them are ones you would find offensive, or if you didn't know me, will you point them out for me?
Please, yeah.
Sometimes I think I'm deaf to them.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
So, my first point is simply that, was slavery terrible? Abso-fucking-lutely. No one disputes this. So much so that just because we don't sign a UN resolution don't mean shit, but we're not gonna, that's a whole other thing. Everybody
There's
understands.
a link below, so watch that argument.
Tell us about it.
Sorry,
Just
I
talking about,
derailed you.
no. I can get it. What was I just talking about?
Slavery was super bad and nobody disputes that.
Nobody disputes
The
that,
reason
yes.
it cannot
Okay.
be monetary. So.
Right. So we have as a species been doing things I would consider I wouldn't consider them reparations, because these are laws we're making because people are dumb enough to have to need these laws. So I don't consider policy change necessarily reparations. I do think it is a better thing for humanity as a whole for that. Even though it's not technically reparations.
What kind of policy change?
Like, civil rights laws, right? Like, we shouldn't have needed those laws because the Constitution says what the Constitution says, and the Constitution says nothing about your fucking race. So we shouldn't have needed those laws. But y'all done fucked up some shit. It was obvious shit you shouldn't have fucked up, and now we have to make laws about it.
There were laws that enforced slavery as well. We made laws. It's not like, someone broke the rule that there's no slavery and then, what am I saying? Legally slaves were, or like even like in the Jim Crow South, I think, when it came to voting, black people counted as less votes than white people.
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand things like affirmative action. I have
rates are gonna be the same, so I prefer we stay on time.
Right, yes. So if the reparations conversation wants to be had in a legal setting, it very obviously cannot be, here's what everyone should be paid monetarily. Could do it government. I think affirmative action was a way to help and balance that and help socially account for that. I think it had negative unintended consequences that we now know about that should point out the fact that that's not the way to go as a society. That has to do with the monetary thing. Present day individuals as direct account managers for 19th century moral debts. Pretend you can't ever truly square the ledger and pretend you can't have a big check. They create a false sense that we're done now and racism solved. Perfect, there it is. A reparations, just in general, like legally on the table, coming from the government, you now run the risk of saying, okay, you've got it, we're done. No more needs.
Racism. Yeah.
Like, and that's definitely gonna be a false thing. So this is why I feel like we have to do it through policy as well.
Okay.
How to get a better school system in the areas that are more troubled should be the real question we're asking. And since that's the case, really, instead of focusing on Black people, we should just be focusing on impoverished people. It will already disproportionately help the Black community, but it won't necessarily be reparations because they're going to other people, not just you. But I still think rising people out of poverty in general is a better way to do it. And I'd rather attack those systems so they don't stay intact as much as possible. The question just becomes, what's the best way to reform that system? And we always have different arguments on what that is and why. There's always a branch.
Yeah, it's an enormously complex issue, and, okay, I agree, we don't wanna create the, we don't wanna like, sign these checks and be like, okay, racism done, you're welcome,
Yeah.
kind of thing, cause,
I also feel like, what about if you're a descendant of a Union soldier that died for that cause? Like, do you have to pay? Does it have to come out of your tax dollars? Or do white people have to find their lineage or whatever? If it's a white person's lineage, that they owe you money. Why would it affect people who weren't ancestrally involved in it? Is my question.
well, just, so in my mind, it doesn't have to do with our involvement insofar as our direct family lineage, so much as the trickle-down effect of like, white privilege as I see it. The fact that we do not have the talk, when we are growing up. Like, that it's my, when I have to pay for like having such a cushy, environment in my formative years, and thus being a well Sure, and in my mind, taxing them more is not tantamount to eating them, and whatever hardship or whatever lessons they fail to learn, I think the kind of more likely thing to happen is they are attached to such a largesse in the form of old white money that they're like feet will never really touch the ground no matter how badly they screw up.
Don't know why you think that.
I mean, there are exceptions, I'm sure, but yeah, like the wealth divide in America has grown to like the largest level possibly in history. I think like Scott Galloway brought up this something called the Gini Index, which is like a measure of the wealth gap between the rich and poor in a given country, and we just hit something like 84 on that index, and apparently when the French Revolution happened, France was at 81. So like we're in bad territory here when it comes to the potential for the have-nots ganging up and actually eating the haves.
I need the quick thoughts guy to do a thing for me.
Okay.
Because now I'm wondering, I'm looking at wealth distribution in my head on a graph, right?
Mhm.
And in feudalism, I would think that would be the spikiest fucking graph you've ever seen in your whole life, right?
As in such a large divide between the wealthy and the poor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that right? I guess it wouldn't be
Feudalism
spiky.
is
It depends on how you're looking at it. Quick thoughts guy will know how to put this data on the screen.
okay.
Wealth gap. Back in feudalism, that spike would be super hard. And I think we've been trying to figure out a system that allows that spike to even out into a flat line. Would you agree?
As in close the gap between the wealthy and the poor, or at least keep it to an acceptable level. I'm listening.
No. That is not the right analogy. What analogy am I trying to give? You know what? I'll ask Perplexity when I'm editing this session in this moment. What the hell was I trying to say there, Perplexity? I know it was a good point. I just can't think what it was now. And that is gonna happen sometimes in these musings here.
Nothing wrong with that.
Do you
I
know
mean-
what to happen? Sound.
You were talking about something.
I
You had a few more
was
questions.
talking about something, and then you said something.
Oh, I mentioned the Gini Index, that like America is in French Revolution territory in terms of the wealth gap, but I think that was in response to, yeah, you made a point that indicated like something, or was the feudalism before or after this? I think it was after.
Yeah, it was after.
So the when I said that, when I interrupted with the thing about the Gini Index, I was responding to we argued about you're flabbergasted by my perception of people born rich, that even if they fail to learn the lessons, they're not necessarily going to be touched by the law or by anything resembling a consequence throughout their life. Cough, cough, Donald Trump, cough. So that maybe it's like my Trump derangement syndrome that makes me think this way of all rich people, and there are certainly different gradations potential for like going from riches to rags. I've just never heard of it happening.
Never heard of a bridges to rags story, huh?
Except in like the movies maybe.
And you think that's not a art imitating life thing? You think it's just art? If it ever happened, it would be life imitating art.
I'm not sure if that trope is a life imitating art thing or if it's meant to satisfy like our kind of desire to punish the rich in general, to like see them humbled. I don't know. Like a lot of improbable things happen in stories that like are just satisfying. This geek is obviously never going to go to prom with the freaking Vanessa. But, you want to root for him?
Rich people. Oh. I have a whole other tangent for the whole billionaires' taxes, who's being taxed more, etc. That we should go down at some point, not right now.
Okay.
It's fascinating. Anyway. This was initially about reparations. And talking about
Well, it started with like me calling out any of these opinions that I might find offensive if it were not you, and I haven't heard anything like that.
good.
So if or there are more down the list that I might find offensive if it were not you.
Let's see. So yeah, read about it. Yeah, so less reparations and more just constantly trying to ensure people are less biased in morally abhorrent ways. Because we are all biased. We all have biases. And the fact that we do is never going to change. That is just there. It's just inherent.
Yep.
That we should be doing more to single out the ones that make it unfair for other people in the same space is absolutely a certainty. We should be doing more to do that specific
And
thing.
what if there's a
Whether or
difference
not
between a
the
spirit
government
orb
does that
and
or not is what I disagree with frequently. And oh yeah, I was talking about communities and contributing to your communities. That's right. So I was saying, right now, or if you can't find a way to contribute to your community, in a way that allows you to organically live in that community on your own merit, then I don't think you're contributing to your community in a good enough way. I think if you have to rely on other people, that's not always necessarily your fault by any means.
this night shield could break.
I look at humanity from the worst first perspective, and the worst first perspective is that we are a global species that has to live amongst everyone else, and we're doing something
Got 'em all.
to game the system, we have to make the laws to make you not game the system. Even if that's on the low end of the system too. So like, we're just regulating the gamingness of the system, on the top and back ends. Top and bottom ends is really what it's all about, isn't it? Yeah, I'm sorry.
We're,
No,
yeah,
I
just
do.
failing to connect this to, reparations.
Somewhere.
Mhm.
So when I say I'm against reparations, I'm against lump sum payments to people.
Okay,
If that is the only way in which you as a viewer feel is the way to get reparations, then we are at an impasse, because I do not feel that is the best way to get reparations. And I would need to understand their perspective, why lump sum payment is the best way. As we discussed.
wait, did we discuss it, or you would still need to hear those arguments, cause I feel like I laid it out in the poverty line,
Yes,
experiment.
but that was about what's right, not about what's best.
That was what's best. The right part is, who would be eligible, which, in my argument was, those with a connection to those with a Jim Crow relative. That was the part of my argument that, I would consider doing the right thing, doing the best thing was lifting, them out of poverty. Is whatever, like,
Really?
yeah,
Can't wait to correct this mess. Okay. So, lifting them out of poverty is the best way. Sure. Okay, yes. The right way to do it isn't giving them money though, right? You think the,
I think that their dollar amount, that choosing the dollar amount based on the level of their perceived injustice is the non-starter. That's the argument that blows up, just because of how much it opens the, government for like lawsuits. But like, and yeah, just, it's insulting to suggest that there is a dollar amount, that would compensate for the atrocity that was slavery.
yes.
So that's why I think that while it should be a dollar amount, that dollar amount should not be chosen based on, the level of injustice, but rather what would it take to improve, the circumstances of the most people. And in that case, I think that, lifting those, with Jim Crow relatives who've, as I see it, been, subject to systemic racism, would be the, would be the most logical ones to lift out of poverty. And I think it would also work as an experiment, for like what establishing, what, giving what raising people out of poverty does for the crime rate.
Gotcha. How would you raise them out of poverty? What do you think is the best way to raise them out of poverty?
Giving them, payments that would, by today's standards, like bring them above the poverty level, that would give them some level of disposable income and, in a tax bracket where they didn't have to worry about a medical emergency crippling their family.
I thought that was what was right, not what was best.
That's what's best, in my mind.
So you still do think, it is the best idea is to give them money, just, that's it. You would find a dollar amount that gives them, makes them rise out of poverty, whatever that dollar amount is, give it to all black people, that will, or no, not give it to all black people, that's the other thing. Find a dollar amount, give it to them, that rises them out of poverty.
implementation, that's, you know, what I've suggested, but like I said, whatever does most good for the most people, like whatever, gets more people above the poverty level, whatever like lifts more people from a state of poverty to a state of non-poverty, like that's where, at the end of the day, I would draw the boundary. I think this is at best, like Jim Crow, having Jim Crow relative is at best a jumping off point to start negotiations, as Sherry said.
Okay, so it's not for anyone in poverty, only black people in poverty though.
I mean, it could work for, like, I think a program like this, would be great to do for anyone in poverty, as you've argued. I think that reparations, like, I think reparations is a good entry, or is a good, I think the idea of reparations provides a good testing ground for the sort of theory that might go into a more wide rollout of these payments that would like essentially lift everyone out of poverty. I think we would see enough results from just doing it for impoverished black communities that we would see the benefit of it, and or not. You know, it's an experiment. I would accept the results either way, but based on these studies that I've heard about, I would predict that we would have more people contributing to society in a meaningful way, and crime would drop significantly.
So your suggestion is, the half of it is collect enough tax dollars from everyone to give every black person who can trace their lineage this much money per month guaranteed.
I would accept, I would be very happy with that proposal, yeah.
But you don't know what that would look like monetarily as a
Not
tax.
to the dollar, no, and like, yeah, and even where to draw the boundaries of who's eligible. I guess it is just sort of like that instinct that there would be more people having a Jim Crow relative who are currently in a state of poverty than simply the total of the black population in America. That just makes more sense at a gut level, but
Right, but in order to pay for all of this, we will now have to tax people a certain amount. More. The people that are being taxed that are reaping the punishment of their ancestors' sins, which
That would
also
be the-
does not feel fair.
well, true, but for someone to whom life has been more or less unfair in their favor in every other, at least, you know, in the sense of also being able to enjoy the imbalance between, or the imbalance that was they've also, as I see it, been they've also, as I see it, been the beneficiaries of the imbalance that was set in motion by our white ancestors. So it's not fair that they are being penalized for the sins of their ancestors any more than it is fair that they are reaping the rewards of the cruelty of their ancestors.
How do you think a poor white kid who got jumped every day by a group of black kids at school is going to feel about you taking X amount more dollars out of their hard-earned money to pour towards these people?
I would ask Joe history of black people in America, and you tell me just what fair is.
Yeah, I still don't think fair would mean that dude has to pay more out of his taxes. But you are suggesting the billionaires would fit this bill and it would not affect the middle class whatsoever?
I mean, I don't know about whatsoever. We all pay our share. But I think that, like, yeah, I would prefer that we, I
Do
think
it voluntarily? That's what I would
even
prefer. I would prefer if we just do it voluntarily.
And yeah, we have the option of doing that now, that it has not happened, so,
Right. Oh my god, we do. Nope, I'm being petty and spiteful right now, sorry. Billionaires,
I'm sure that
middle
it would,
class.
yeah, I would prefer that if we were to pass, this sort of law, that, we just we carve it out, that it should fall more on those who are, the ultra wealthy, should mostly be paying into this reparations tax, just because I think there would be a